I will never forget the moment my father looked me in the eye and handed everything I built to my brother. 9 years of 16-hour days, missed birthdays, and sacrificed relationships, all erased in a single sentence. Gerald stood behind his mahogany desk, the one I bought after saving the company from bankruptcy, and said Dylan would be taking over as president. My golden child brother who spent the last decade partying across Europe while I bled for this business. Dad offered me a supervisor position under Dylan. Under him. I walked out that day and never looked back. The silence in my office was deafening after everyone left. I sat in the leather chair I had purchased 3 years earlier when we finally turned a profit, staring at the wall where I had hung our first major contract. My hands were shaking, not from anger, though there was plenty of that, from disbelief. I joined Coleman Construction when I was 23 years old. The company my grandfather started in 1972 was 3 months from bankruptcy. Gerald had run it into the ground with bad decisions and worse management. Creditors were circling. Employees had not been paid in 6 weeks. The bank was ready to foreclose on everything. I came in fresh from college with a degree in civil engineering and 0 experience. But I had ideas. I worked 110 hours a week that first year. I personally called every single creditor and negotiated payment plans. I took no salary for 18 months. Living in a studio apartment that cost $470 a month. Eating ramen noodles and day-old bread. I kept the lights on. I kept 12 families fed. By year 2, we were breaking even. By year 3, we were profitable. By year 5, we had expanded into commercial construction and had 3 crews running simultaneously. By year 7, we were the most respected mid-size construction firm in the state. I did that. Me, Tucker Coleman. But it cost me everything else. My wife Laura left me 2 years ago. I missed our 5th anniversary because I was closing a deal with Henderson Properties, worth $1.4 million. I missed our 6th anniversary finishing a hospital wing ahead of schedule. She asked me once if I loved the company more than her. I did not answer fast enough. She was gone within a month. I missed my best friend Ryan's funeral because I was in Dallas negotiating a contract. Ryan died in a car accident at 31 years old, and I was not there to say goodbye because I was trying to prove something to a father who apparently never cared. Meanwhile, Dylan got everything handed to him. Gerald paid for 4 years at UCLA, where Dylan barely maintained a 2.1 grade point average. He majored in communications and minored in partying. After graduation, Gerald funded 3 years of Dylan finding himself in Europe. Paris, Barcelona, Amsterdam, Rome. Gerald sent him $50,000 twice to bail him out of situations he would not discuss. Dylan came back tan, fluent in broken Spanish, and utterly useless. But he had charisma. Dad loved that about him. Dylan could walk into a room and make everyone laugh. He was 6'2", played baseball in high school. Had that easy confidence that made people trust him instantly. I was 5'10", quiet, serious. I made spreadsheets, not friends. After the meeting, I found Gerald in his office. He was pouring himself bourbon, even though it was 2 in the afternoon. I said I wanted to talk about his decision. He said there was nothing to discuss. Dylan was taking over in 3 months, when Gerald officially retired. I asked what role I would have. He said I would be a supervisor, reporting to Dylan. I asked him if he remembered 9 years ago when the company was dying. He said of course he remembered. I asked him who saved it. He looked at me like I had asked a stupid question. He said we all did, as a family. I told him that was not true. I saved it. Me. Alone. While Dylan was getting drunk in European hostels, I was here, bleeding for this company. Did that mean nothing? Gerald set down his glass and looked at me with something like pity. He said Dylan had charisma and people skills. He said I was a worker bee, reliable but not a leader. He said the company needed someone who could inspire people, not just crunch numbers and bark orders at contractors. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I asked about equity, about ownership. After 9 years of building this company from ashes, did I not deserve a stake in it? He said I had been paid a salary. That was enough. Dylan needed full control to make his mark. I stood there trying to process this. My little sister Emma was in the doorway. She was 28, worked in the office doing administrative tasks. She looked at me with sympathy but said nothing. She would not cross Dad. Nobody did. I tried one more time. I asked Gerald to reconsider. I told him Dylan had no experience, no knowledge of the business, no understanding of our clients or contracts or crews. He would destroy everything we built. Gerald stood up and walked to the window. He said Dylan had been preparing for this. He had been studying the business. He was ready. That was when I knew something was wrong. Dylan studying, Dylan preparing. That did not sound like my brother at all. I asked Gerald directly if Dylan had said something to him about me. Gerald turned around and his face was hard. He asked what I meant. I said it seemed like he was trying to push me out specifically, not just promote Dylan. Gerald walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. He tossed it to me. Inside were printed emails, from my email address, to competitors, discussing selling client lists and proprietary bidding strategies, discussing leaving Coleman Construction to start a competing firm and taking our biggest clients with me. I stared at the emails. I had never written them. I had never even thought about leaving until that exact moment. I told Gerald these were fake. He said they came from my company email account. I said anyone could have accessed my account. I barely used passwords. He asked who would do that. I looked him in the eye and said Dylan. Gerald's face turned red. He said I was paranoid and jealous. He said Dylan had brought these emails to him 3 months ago, worried about what I was planning. He said Dylan had been protecting the family business while I was apparently plotting to destroy it. I stood there holding fake emails that my brother had created to sabotage me. The betrayal was not just losing the company. It was realizing Dylan had actively worked to turn my father against me. And Gerald had believed him without ever asking me, without even giving me a chance to defend myself. I dropped the folder on Gerald's desk and walked out. I did not say another word. 3 days later, I typed my resignation letter. It was 2 sentences long. I quit effective immediately. I thanked no one. I cleaned out my office in 20 minutes. Personal photos, my engineering degree, a coffee mug Emma gave me that said "World's Best Brother." Everything else stayed. Let Dylan figure out the filing system. Let him find the vendor contracts. Let him discover which subcontractors were reliable and which would vanish with your deposit. I was walking to my truck when Sharon stopped me in the parking lot. She was our project manager, 47 years old, had been with the company for 6 years. She asked if the rumors were true. I told her I was done. She looked at me for a long moment and then said she was coming with me. I told her I had no company, no office, nothing to offer. She said she did not care. She had watched me build this place, and she was not sticking around to watch Dylan destroy it. By the end of the day, Carlos and Ben had both called me. Carlos was our lead foreman, built like a tank, could organize a crew better than anyone I had ever met. Ben was our chief estimator, could calculate material costs and timelines in his head faster than most people could use a calculator. They both quit within 24 hours. I told them all the same thing. I had $83,000 in savings. I was starting over from nothing. I could not promise them anything. Sharon said she did not need promises. Carlos said he needed a boss who knew what he was doing. Ben said he would rather bet on me with nothing than watch Dylan run a profitable company into the ground. I rented a tiny office in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. $800 a month for 400 square feet. I registered an LLC called Titan Construction Services. I bought used desks from a liquidation sale. I had business cards printed at a local shop for $67. Dylan took over Coleman Construction the day I left. He had a big speech prepared for the remaining employees about new directions and fresh energy. I heard about it from Emma, who called me that night crying. She said it was a disaster. Half the staff looked ready to quit. Dylan had no idea what he was talking about. I told Emma she should have spoken up at the meeting when Dad announced his decision. She said she was scared. I told her I understood, but I could not help her now. I had my own problems. My first week was terrifying. I had no clients. I had no contracts. I had 3 loyal employees and a shrinking bank account. I spent $1,800 on basic tools and equipment. I spent $900 on insurance. I spent $420 on software subscriptions. I got my first job from a Craigslist ad. A guy named Doug needed his garage renovated. $6,000. It was humiliating. I had been managing projects worth millions. Now I was doing garage work. But money was money. Sharon, Carlos, Ben, and I did that garage in 5 days. We did it perfectly. Doug was thrilled. He told his neighbor. His neighbor hired us to build a deck. $8,000. 2 weeks after I left Coleman Construction, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer. It was Marcus Steele, CEO of Westfield Development Group. They were one of our biggest clients at Coleman. $50 million in contracts over 3 years. Marcus said he heard I had started my own firm. I asked how he heard that. He said word travels fast in this business. He asked if I had the capacity to handle a project. I was honest. I told him I had 3 employees and almost no resources. I was starting from zero. Marcus laughed. He said he liked honesty. He said Westfield had a project coming up, renovating their corporate office building. $220,000. He said the job was mine if I wanted it. I asked why he would trust a brand new company. He said he was not trusting the company. He was trusting me. He said every project I had managed at Coleman came in on time and under budget. He said he did not care about the Coleman name. He cared about Tucker Coleman. I felt something I had not felt in 3 days. Hope. I told him I would take the job. We scheduled a meeting for the following Monday to go over details. That Friday, Dylan called me. He was furious. He said I had stolen a client. I told him I had not stolen anything. Marcus called me. Dylan said I had violated a non-compete clause. I told him I never signed a non-compete. He said it was implied. I told him to have his lawyer call my lawyer and hung up, except I did not have a lawyer. On Monday morning, I got served with papers. Dylan was suing me for breach of fiduciary duty, theft of trade secrets, and tortious interference with business relationships. Gerald was backing him. The lawsuit claimed I had stolen client lists and proprietary information to start a competing business. None of it was true, but defending against it would cost money I did not have. I found a lawyer named Julie Henderson through a referral from Ben's cousin. She was in her late 40s, sharp as a knife, and did not waste words. Her retainer was $18,000. I paid it and watched my savings account drop to $65,000. Julie reviewed the lawsuit and said it was garbage. No non-compete, no theft, no breach. But she said garbage lawsuits still cost money to defend. She estimated $60,000 to $80,000 total in legal fees by the time we got it dismissed. I told her I did not have $80,000. She said we would figure it out. Meanwhile, I was trying to get the Westfield project started. I met with their facilities director and their CFO. We walked through the building. It needed new flooring, updated electrical, fresh paint, new lighting, renovated bathrooms. 2 months of work if we stayed on schedule. I gave them a detailed timeline and budget breakdown. They approved everything. We started the following Monday. But word was getting around that I was being sued by my former company. 3 of my regular suppliers refused to extend me credit. They said they did not want to get caught in the middle of a legal battle. I had to pay cash up front for materials. I maxed out 2 credit cards. $32,000 between them. Bought flooring, paint, electrical supplies, plumbing fixtures. My debt was piling up, but I had no choice. If I lost the Westfield contract, I was finished. Dylan was spreading rumors. I heard them from former employees who reached out quietly. He was telling people I had abandoned the family business, that I had stolen clients, that I was unstable and vindictive. People who had known me for years were starting to doubt me. Sharon, Carlos, and Ben were working for reduced pay. I promised them I would make it right when money came in. They believed me. One afternoon, my ex-wife Laura called. We had not spoken in 8 months. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I was surprised, but I agreed. We met at a Starbucks near her apartment. She looked good. She had cut her hair short. She seemed happier than when we were married. That hurt more than I expected. She said she heard about what happened with my family. She said she wanted to apologize. I asked what for. She said for believing things about me that were not true. I did not understand. She looked down at her coffee and said that 2 years ago, right before she left me, Dylan had called her. He told her I was having an affair with Sharon. He gave her details. times we were supposedly together. A hotel in Memphis. Dinners after work. He made it sound so believable. Laura said she confronted me, but I had been so distracted with work that I barely engaged with the conversation. She took my distance as guilt. She left without ever really giving me a chance to explain. She said she realized recently, after hearing about Dylan taking over the company and the lawsuit, that Dylan had lied to her. There was never an affair. He had destroyed our marriage to isolate me. I sat there trying to process this. Dylan had not just sabotaged me at work. He had sabotaged my personal life. For years. He wanted me alone, disconnected, vulnerable. Laura started crying. She said she was sorry. She said she should have trusted me. I told her it was not her fault. Dylan was good at lying. He had convinced our father I was a traitor. Why would he not convince my wife I was unfaithful? We talked for 2 hours. It did not fix anything between us. Too much time had passed. But it helped to know the truth. The Westfield project was going well. We were ahead of schedule. The work was clean, professional. Marcus called me halfway through and said he was impressed. Then everything fell apart. We were in week 5 of the project. Carlos was overseeing the electrical work. We had hired a subcontractor named Eddie Marsh, came recommended by one of Ben's contacts. Eddie had 20 years of experience and good references. One morning, Sharon was doing an inspection and noticed something wrong with the wiring in the executive suite. She called me immediately. I came down with Carlos and we pulled open the wall. The wiring was a disaster. Wrong gauge wire. Improper connections. No proper grounding. It was a fire hazard. If someone had plugged in too many devices, the whole floor could have gone up in flames. I confronted Eddie. He was defensive at first. Then he broke down. He admitted someone had paid him $10,000 to do substandard work. He said a man approached him 3 weeks into the project, said he represented a competing company that wanted to see me fail. The man told Eddie to cut corners, make it look like my crew did not know what they were doing. I asked Eddie to describe the man. Young, tall, confident, looked like he had money. Drove a new Mercedes. Dylan drove a new Mercedes. A silver one. $78,000. I had seen him post about it on social media. I could not prove it was Dylan. Eddie said the man never gave his name. But I knew. In my gut, I knew. I had to fix all the electrical work, rip it out and start over. That meant additional labor costs and materials. $41,000 out of my pocket. The Westfield contract had a fixed price. I could not charge them for the extra work without admitting I had hired a saboteur. I ate the cost. My debt climbed to $113,000. I completed the Westfield job on time despite the setback. Marcus was thrilled. He said the work was exceptional. He paid the full $220,000 as agreed. But after paying Sharon, Carlos, and Ben their wages, covering materials, equipment, insurance, office rent, and my lawyer, I barely broke even. I paid down some of my credit card debt, but I was still $97,000 in the hole. Then Julie called with worse news. Gerald had used his connections at the state contractor licensing board. Someone filed a complaint claiming I had falsified credentials on my license application. It was completely false, but the board had to investigate. The investigation would take 90 days. During that time, I could not bid on any projects over $50,000. My license was flagged. I was effectively shut out of any major work for 3 months. I took whatever small jobs I could find. Deck repairs for $3,000. Bathroom renovations for $5,000. Kitchen updates for $8,000. It was humiliating work for someone who had managed projects worth millions. But I had Sharon, Carlos, and Ben counting on me. I had bills to pay. I had debt crushing me from every direction. My credit card debt was $130,000 between personal cards and a business line of credit I had opened. Interest alone was eating me alive. $4,000 a month just to service the debt. I was not sleeping. I was losing weight. I would wake up at 3 in the morning doing calculations in my head, trying to figure out how to survive the next month. Sharon pulled me aside one day after we finished a bathroom remodel in a subdivision house. She said Carlos and Ben were worried about me. She said I looked like hell. I told her I was fine. She said I was a terrible liar. I admitted I was considering bankruptcy. The debt was too much. The license suspension was killing me. I could not see a way out. Sharon said I was not allowed to give up. She said we had all bet on me and we were not wrong. She said something would break our way. I wanted to believe her. 2 weeks later, my sister Emma called me. It was 11 at night. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. I asked what was wrong. She said everything was falling apart at Coleman Construction. Dylan had lost 3 major clients in 4 months. The Martinez industrial contract, worth $3.2 million annually, had canceled after Dylan missed 2 deadlines and went 47% over budget on a warehouse renovation. Martinez had been with Coleman for 12 years. They were furious. Dylan had fired 4 longtime employees, including the VP of operations who had worked there for 19 years. The man had tried to explain to Dylan how the scheduling system worked, and Dylan accused him of undermining his authority. Fired him on the spot. 3 other key people quit in solidarity. Company revenue was down 62% compared to the same period last year when I was running things. Gerald was panicking. He had taken out a line of credit to cover Dylan's mistakes, but the hole kept getting deeper. Emma said Dylan was in over his head, but too arrogant to admit it. Gerald was too proud to admit he had been wrong about Dylan. They were bleeding money and blaming everyone but themselves. Emma begged me to come back. She said she would talk to Gerald, convince him to give me a real position, real authority. She said the company needed me. I told her no, absolutely not. I said they made their choice. I said Gerald believed fake emails over his own son. I said Dylan actively destroyed my marriage and my reputation. I said they could all drown for all I cared. Emma cried harder. She said the employees did not deserve this. She said 12 families depended on that company. I told her I was sorry, but it was not my problem anymore. They wanted Dylan so badly, they could live with the consequences. I hung up feeling worse than before. I hated what was happening to Coleman Construction, but I also felt a bitter satisfaction. I had told them Dylan would destroy everything. I had been right. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered. It was Marcus Steele from Westfield. He asked if I could meet him for lunch. I said, of course. We met at a steakhouse downtown. Marcus was with his COO, a woman named Patricia Reed. They ordered expensive wine. I ordered water. I could not afford to look like I was struggling, but I also could not afford a $20 glass of wine. Marcus got straight to business. He said Westfield was planning a major expansion. They were building a new medical complex on the south side of the city. $8.7 million project over 18 months. Surgical center, outpatient facilities, administrative offices. Massive undertaking. He said they wanted me to do it. I sat there stunned. This was the biggest opportunity of my career. This would save me. This would establish Titan Construction as a legitimate major player. But it was also terrifying. I would need to hire 15 to 20 people. Rent heavy equipment. Front costs for materials. If anything went wrong, I would be destroyed. Not just broke, obliterated. I asked Marcus why he would trust me with something this big. I had been in business for 4 months. I had 3 employees. Patricia spoke up. She said they had done their research. They knew about the lawsuit. They knew about the license suspension. They also knew it was all nonsense. She said they had called my former clients, people I had worked with at Coleman. Everyone said the same thing. Tucker Coleman delivered. Always on time, always on budget, always high quality. Marcus said he trusted me more than he trusted established firms that had gotten lazy and complacent. He said he wanted someone hungry, someone who would treat this project like it was the most important thing in the world. He knew I would. I asked when they needed an answer. He said they needed to sign contracts by the end of the week. This was Tuesday. I told them I would have an answer by Thursday. I left that lunch dizzy. This could save me, or it could end me. That night, I was in my apartment going over numbers when someone knocked on my door. It was 9:30. I was not expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there stood Gerald and Dylan. Gerald looked older than I remembered. Tired. Dylan looked angry. They pushed their way into my apartment. Gerald said we needed to talk. I asked what they wanted. Dylan said they had a proposal. Gerald laid it out. They wanted me to come back to Coleman Construction. Dylan would remain president, but I would be co-owner, 50-50 split. They would drop the lawsuit immediately. They would pay me a $100,000 signing bonus. I asked why I would do that. Gerald said because we were family. He said the company was struggling and they needed me. He said it was my responsibility to help. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. I said they must be desperate. Dylan's face turned red. He said I should be grateful they were offering me anything. I said I did not want anything from them. Gerald switched tactics. He got emotional. He said my mother would have wanted the family to stay together. He said I was being selfish, putting my pride ahead of the family business she had loved. That hit me hard. Mom died 6 years ago from cancer. She had always defended me when Gerald favored Dylan. She had believed in me when no one else did. Gerald was using her memory as a weapon. But then I realized what this really was. They were not offering me a partnership. They were trying to stop me from taking the Westfield contract. If I came back to Coleman, I would have to turn down Marcus. They would absorb Titan Construction into Coleman. Dylan would still be in charge. I would be saving them while giving up my independence. And once Coleman recovered, they would push me out again. I knew it. This was not reconciliation. This was survival. Their survival. I told them to get out. Gerald said I was making a mistake. Dylan said I would regret this. I said the only thing I regretted was wasting 9 years of my life on people who did not appreciate me. They left. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I called Marcus the next morning and told him I was in. He said he would have contracts ready by Friday. I was betting everything on this project. If it failed, I would lose it all. But if I succeeded, I would build something real, something mine. I signed the Westfield contracts on Friday afternoon. $8.7 million. The advance payment was $2.1 million to cover initial costs and mobilization. It was more money than I had ever handled in my life. The first thing I did was pay off my debt. $130,000. Gone. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The second thing I did was bring Sharon, Carlos, and Ben into my office. I told them I was making them partners. Each of them would get 15% equity in Titan Construction. I would keep 55%. They would get profit sharing and decision-making authority. Sharon cried. Carlos hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Ben just smiled and said it was about time. I hired 12 more people. Some were former Coleman employees who had left after Dylan took over. Some were people I had worked with on other projects over the years. Good people. Skilled workers who had been waiting for the right opportunity. I rented equipment. Excavators, dozers, cranes, lifts. $240,000 in rental agreements for 18 months. I signed vendor contracts for materials. I opened accounts with suppliers who now, seeing the Westfield contract, were happy to extend credit. The medical complex project launched in early October. The site was a 10-acre lot on the south side that had been vacant for 8 years. We broke ground on a Monday morning. Marcus, Patricia, and a dozen Westfield executives were there for the ceremony. Local news covered it. I gave a brief interview about Titan Construction. It felt surreal. The first 2 months went perfectly. We were ahead of schedule. The foundation was poured and cured faster than projected. The steel framework went up without issues. My crews were working like a machine. Carlos had the site organized better than any job I had ever seen. Ben's estimates were dead accurate. Sharon was managing subcontractors and schedules flawlessly. Then in early December, a storm hit. Not a hurricane, but a massive winter storm system that dumped 3 feet of snow and ice on us over 4 days. The site flooded. Equipment was damaged. Materials we had stored on site were destroyed. Lumber warped. Drywall ruined. Electrical components soaked. $90,000 in materials gone. I called our insurance company. They said they would investigate the claim. Investigation would take 4 to 6 weeks. In the meantime, I needed to replace everything to stay on schedule. If I fell behind, Westfield could invoke penalty clauses in the contract. I would owe them $50,000 for every week we were late. I had no choice. I used the remaining advance payment to buy replacement materials. I shifted money from payroll reserves. I borrowed against my personal credit again. I was back in debt, $58,000. But we stayed on schedule. By January, We were back on track. The storm damage was behind us. The building was taking shape. You could see it rising from the lot, steel and concrete and glass. It looked beautiful. Then I got a call from a friend who still worked at Coleman Construction. His name was Tyler. He said I needed to know something. Dylan had been meeting with Westfield executives. Secretly, he was trying to steal my contract. I felt my stomach drop. I asked what he meant. Tyler said Dylan had pitched Westfield on letting Coleman take over the medical complex. He claimed Titan was too small and inexperienced for a project this size. He said we would eventually fail and leave them with a half-finished building. He offered to complete the job for 15% less than our contract price. 15% of $8.7 million was $1.3 million. Dylan was offering to lose $1.3 million just to take the project from me. That made no sense unless he was desperate. Unless Coleman was so broke that they needed this project to survive, even at a massive loss. I called Marcus immediately. He did not answer. I called Patricia. She did not answer. I left messages. No response. For 3 days, I heard nothing. My anxiety was through the roof. If I lost this contract, everything was over. I had hired people, rented equipment, committed to vendors. I would be buried in debt with no way out. Finally, Marcus called me back. He asked me to come to his office. I drove there immediately. I sat in his conference room waiting for 20 minutes. When Marcus and Patricia walked in, their faces were serious. My heart was pounding. Marcus said Dylan had indeed approached them. He had given them a detailed presentation about why Coleman Construction was a better choice. He had pointed out that Titan had only been in business for 6 months. He had raised concerns about our capacity. I asked if they were canceling my contract. Marcus said they were considering it. I felt panic rising. I asked them to give me a chance to respond. Patricia said that was why I was there. I pulled out my laptop. I had prepared for this. I showed them our progress reports. We were 2 weeks ahead of schedule. We were 4% under budget. Every inspection had passed on the first try. Our safety record was perfect. 0 incidents. I showed them testimonials from our subcontractors. I showed them the Westfield office renovation we had completed. I showed them quality metrics, timeline analyses, cost breakdowns. Then I looked Marcus in the eye and said something I had been thinking about for days. I told him Dylan was not offering them a deal. He was offering them a disaster. Coleman Construction had lost 6 of their 10 biggest clients in the last 6 months. Their revenue was down by 2/3. They were hemorrhaging money. If Westfield gave them this contract, Coleman would either fail halfway through, leaving Westfield with a lawsuit and an unfinished building, or Coleman would cut corners to try to make back their losses, giving Westfield a substandard medical facility. I told them I understood they were taking a risk on a young company, but I was not asking them to take a risk on a company. I was asking them to take a risk on me. And I had never failed them. Marcus and Patricia looked at each other. Patricia asked how I knew Coleman was struggling. I said I had sources. I did not mention Emma or Tyler. Marcus said they needed to discuss it. He said they would have an answer by the end of the week. I left feeling like I was going to throw up. 2 days later, on a Friday afternoon, Emma called me. She was frantic. Gerald had found out she had been feeding me information about Coleman's problems. Someone had seen her meeting with me at a coffee shop weeks earlier and told Dylan. Gerald fired her. Immediately. Escorted her out of the building by security. He also evicted her from the condo she was living in. It was owned by the company. He gave her 30 days to get out. Emma was sobbing. She said she had nowhere to go. She said she did not know what to do. She had helped me, and now she had lost everything. I felt crushing guilt. I told her to come stay with me. My apartment had a second bedroom I used as an office. She could stay there as long as she needed. She said she could not impose. I said she was not imposing. She was my sister. She said she would be there in an hour. Emma moved in that night with 2 suitcases and a lot of tears. I made her dinner. We did not talk much. She was too upset. I set her up in the spare room and told her we would figure it out. I could not sleep that night. I kept thinking about Emma losing everything because she helped me. I kept thinking about the Westfield contract hanging by a thread. I kept thinking about Dylan destroying everything he touched. Saturday morning, Marcus called. He asked me to come to his office. Emergency meeting. I drove there in 15 minutes. Marcus and Patricia were waiting with their CFO and legal counsel. This looked serious. I prepared myself to lose the contract. Marcus said they had made a decision. He said after reviewing everything, they were keeping me on the medical complex project. I felt relief flood through me. But Marcus was not done. He said they were also offering me 3 additional projects. A corporate training facility worth $4.2 million. A warehouse expansion worth $3.1 million. An office park renovation worth $6.8 million. Total of $14 million over 3 years. They wanted Titan Construction to be their exclusive contractor for all major projects. I sat there unable to speak. Patricia explained their reasoning. She said they had done their homework on Coleman. They discovered Dylan was being investigated by the state for contract violations with other clients. They discovered Gerald had mortgaged his house to cover company debts. They discovered Coleman was on the verge of bankruptcy. She said Gerald had called Marcus personally, leveraging their 30-year friendship, to pressure him to cancel my contract and give it to Dylan. Marcus said that call had disgusted him. He had known Gerald was ruthless, but he did not know Gerald would try to destroy his own son to protect his golden child. Marcus said he wanted to work with people who had integrity, people who delivered, people who were hungry and honest. That was me, not Gerald or Dylan. I signed new contracts that afternoon. $14 million in work. Titan Construction was no longer a startup. We were a real company. I drove home feeling like I had won. But when I walked into my apartment, Emma was on the couch crying. She said Gerald had filed a police report. He was claiming I had broken into Coleman construction offices and stolen proprietary documents. The documents Emma had given me showing Dylan's fraud and mismanagement. Gerald was trying to have me arrested for corporate espionage. If the police believed him, I could face criminal charges. 3 to 5 years in prison. I would lose my contractor license. I would lose every contract I just signed. Everything would be gone. I called Julie immediately. She said corporate espionage was serious. If the district attorney pressed charges, I could be facing felony charges. Even if I was found not guilty, the legal battle would destroy my business. Westfield would never stay with a contractor under criminal investigation. I could provide Emma as a witness. She could testify that she gave me those documents voluntarily, that I never broke in. But Gerald would then turn on her. She could be charged as an accessory, as someone who stole company documents. Emma could face charges too. I told Julie I would not let Emma take the fall for helping me. She asked what I wanted to do. I said I would figure something out. That night, I sat with Emma in my living room. She was a mess. She felt responsible. She said she never should have given me those documents. I told her she did the right thing. Dylan was committing fraud. Gerald was covering it up. She had exposed the truth. She asked what would happen to me. I told her honestly I did not know. I might go to jail. I might lose everything. She started crying again. I told her it was not her fault. The next morning, Tyler called me again. He said 3 former Coleman employees wanted to talk to me. I asked why. He said they had evidence. Real evidence of what Dylan had been doing. I met them at a diner that afternoon. 3 people I knew from my time at Coleman. Janet, who had been the accounting manager until Dylan fired her 2 months ago. Robert, who had been a senior project manager until he quit after Dylan blamed him for one of Dylan's mistakes. And Marcus Williams, not related to Marcus Steele, who had been a site supervisor for 8 years until Dylan pushed him out. Janet brought a folder. She said she had copies of financial documents showing Dylan had been falsifying invoices to clients, overbilling by 20 to 30%, and pocketing the difference through fake vendor payments. She had bank statements showing transfers to Dylan's personal accounts, $212,000 over 8 months. Robert brought recordings. He said Dylan had bragged to him about sabotaging my electrical work on the Westfield office job. He had it on his phone. Dylan admitting he paid someone to do bad work to make me look incompetent. Dylan laughing about it. Marcus Williams brought emails. Emails between Dylan and Gerald discussing how to get rid of me before I realized I had built the company and might demand equity. Emails from a year ago, long before Gerald announced Dylan would take over. They had been planning to push me out for a long time. I asked them why they were helping me. Janet said because Dylan destroyed her career. She had reported the financial irregularities to Gerald, and Gerald fired her and threatened to sue her for defamation. Robert said Dylan was a liar and a thief and someone needed to stop him. Marcus Williams said I was the best boss he ever had and I deserved justice. I took everything to Julie. She reviewed it all. She said this was explosive. This was not just bad business. This was criminal fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, possibly tax evasion. If the district attorney saw this, Dylan would be the one facing charges, not me. Julie contacted the DA's office. She provided the evidence. She explained that Gerald's claim against me was a smokescreen to protect Dylan from investigation. The DA assigned an investigator. He spent 2 weeks going through everything. He interviewed Janet, Robert, and Marcus Williams. He subpoenaed Coleman Construction's financial records. He interviewed Dylan. 3 weeks after Gerald filed his police report, I got a call from Julie. The charges against me were dropped. Insufficient evidence. More than that, the DA was now investigating Dylan for fraud. The investigator had found enough evidence to support multiple charges. Dylan was going to be indicted. Gerald tried to protect him, but the evidence was too strong. Within days, news spread through the construction industry. Coleman Construction's remaining clients started canceling contracts. Nobody wanted to work with a company under criminal investigation. Within 3 weeks, Coleman Construction filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Total liquidation. Gerald lost everything. The company, his house, which he had mortgaged, his savings, which he had burned through trying to cover Dylan's mistakes and legal fees, his reputation, built over 40 years, destroyed by his golden child in less than 8 months. Dylan was indicted on 4 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of embezzlement. He faced up to 20 years in prison if convicted on all counts. His lawyer negotiated a plea deal: 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and full restitution to the defrauded clients. $112,000. Dylan had to sell his Mercedes to make the first restitution payment. Meanwhile, Titan Construction was thriving. I completed the Westfield Medical Complex in March, 2 weeks ahead of schedule and 6% under budget. Marcus and Patricia were ecstatic. The building was beautiful. State-of-the-art surgical center, comfortable patient rooms, efficient administrative space. Local news covered the grand opening. I was interviewed again, this time as a success story. The other 3 Westfield projects were already underway. I had expanded to 35 employees. Sharon, Carlos, and Ben were full partners. We had moved into a real office building, 2,500 square feet with a conference room and everything. We were legitimate. Titan Construction Services was valued at over $4 million. I had $240,000 in the bank, 0 debt. Contracts lined up for the next 3 years. I was financially secure for the first time in my life. I hired Emma as my chief operations officer. $95,000 a year salary plus benefits. She was brilliant at operations and she deserved a fresh start. I also hired 5 of the best people from Coleman Construction who were left unemployed after the bankruptcy. I paid them well. I treated them with respect. I built a company culture based on loyalty and competence, not favoritism. 6 months after the medical complex opened, my phone rang. It was Gerald. I had not spoken to him since he and Dylan showed up at my apartment trying to get me to come back. He asked if we could meet. He said he wanted to talk. I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet him at a diner. Gerald looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. His hair was completely gray. He had lost weight. He looked tired and defeated. He sat down across from me and just stared at his coffee for a minute. He said he was sorry. He said he had been wrong about everything. About Dylan. About me. About what mattered. I asked him what he wanted. He said he needed help. He had nothing left. The bankruptcy had taken everything. He was living in a 1-bedroom apartment, working as a consultant for a small construction firm in another state, making $42,000 a year. He said it was humiliating after running his own company for 30 years. He said Dylan needed help too. The probation, the restitution, the community service. Dylan was struggling. He needed money for a lawyer for an unrelated civil suit from one of the defrauded clients. Gerald asked if I would help. Financially, He said we were family. I sat there looking at this man who had chosen Dylan over me at every turn, who had believed fake emails over his own son, who had tried to have me arrested to protect his golden child, who had destroyed my marriage, my reputation, and nearly my entire future. I told him I would help, but I had conditions. He looked up, hopeful. I said he had to publicly admit what happened, apologize to me, to Emma, to every employee he had wronged. I said he had to go to therapy to understand why he destroyed his family. I said he had to be honest about Dylan's fraud and stop protecting him from consequences. Gerald said that was a lot. I said it was the minimum. He could take it or leave it. After a long silence, he agreed. I paid for a lawyer for Dylan, not to get him off, but to make sure he got fair representation and did not get crushed by a system that could be brutal to people without resources. The lawyer negotiated the plea deal that kept Dylan out of prison. I started having coffee with Gerald once a month, not to rebuild our relationship, that was gone, but to maintain some connection. He went to therapy like I asked. He admitted publicly that he had been wrong, that Dylan had defrauded clients, that I had built the company and he had destroyed it. It did not fix anything, but it was something. Dylan eventually called me. It took him almost a year. He apologized. Actually apologized, no excuses. He said he had been jealous of me his whole life. Gerald had always loved him, but never respected him. Dylan knew Dad saw him as the favorite, but not as competent. Dylan saw me working hard and earning respect, and he resented it. So he tried to tear me down. He said therapy, court mandated, had helped him see how toxic his behavior had been. He said he did not expect forgiveness. He just wanted me to know he understood what he had done. I told him I appreciated the apology. I told him I was not ready to have him in my life, but maybe someday. He said he understood. He got a job in sales at a software company, nothing to do with construction. He was rebuilding his life from the bottom. I respected that more than anything he had done before. Emma thrived as my COO. She was brilliant at systems and processes. She turned Titan into a well-oiled machine. She started dating one of our project managers, a good guy named Scott. They got engaged a year later. I walked her down the aisle at her wedding. Gerald was there, sitting in the back. Dylan was not invited. Emma said she was not ready for that. I stood at the Westfield Medical Complex one afternoon with Sharon, Carlos, and Ben. We were looking at the building we had created together. 3 stories of glass and steel and hope. Patients were being treated there. Lives were being saved in those operating rooms. We did that. Sharon said she was proud of what we built. Carlos said it was the best work of his career. Ben said he knew from day one I would make it. I thought about my mother. She died believing I would never get the credit I deserved. She died thinking Gerald would always choose Dylan over me. I wish she could see this. See that I did not need Gerald's approval or Dylan's company. I built my own empire from nothing. I proved my worth beyond any doubt. The people who had followed me in my darkest hour, who believed in me when I had nothing, those were my real family. Sharon, Carlos, Ben, Emma. They were the ones who mattered. I learned something through all of this. Your worth is not determined by who believes in you. It is determined by the value you create and the integrity you maintain. Family loyalty is important, but not at the cost of your self-respect. Sometimes walking away from toxicity is the only way to build something real. Success built on your own merit is sweeter than any inheritance. The people who follow you when you have nothing are the ones worth keeping. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not in defeating your enemies, but in building something so good that their defeat becomes inevitable. I looked at the building one more time. Titan Construction Services. My company. Built from $83,000 in savings and a refusal to give up. Built on loyalty, competence, and respect. Built to last. Gerald had given Dylan everything I built, and Dylan destroyed it in less than a year. Meanwhile, I built something bigger from nothing. That was the difference between someone who earns success and someone who has it handed to them. I turned to my team and said, we had another project starting next week. A school renovation. $2.4 million. We had work to do. We got in our trucks and headed to the office. There were buildings to construct and lives to build. And this time, I was building on my own terms. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been overlooked or underestimated by your own family? Have you ever had to walk away from people you love to prove your own worth? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know I am not alone in this. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future stories about people who fought back and won. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are worth more than how others treat them. Your support means everything, and it helps this channel grow. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that your value is not determined by who appreciates you, but by what you build when no one is watching. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never let anyone convince you that you are less than you are. Until next time.